So I am honored to be sharing the stage today a bit with my friend and social media friend, Mark W. Schaefer. Some of you may know him from Twitter. He's at Mark W. Schaefer. Some of you may know him from his absolutely fantastic blog, which is called Grow, G-R-O-W. If you don't subscribe, you should. I read it every day without fail. And some of you may know him from his recent book, The Tao of Twitter, or his new very good book that we're going to talk about today called Return on Influence. And I know that I can speak for both Mark and myself when I say how happy we are to be back at PR Breakfast Club, and we appreciate the kind invitation. So with all of that, I think I will jump into some questions, my friend, that looks a little bit more at the concept of influence as you describe it in your new book. And influence, I know we both agree, is really one of those critical marketing considerations for 2013. So maybe we can speak a little bit more about how marketing and PR professionals can maximize it or perhaps minimize it as the year comes forward.
Very good point.
There are occasionally times where that's for the best.
Sometimes you want to minimize it.
So my first question, you talk in your new book about the fact that social media links are weak links. And I think PRBC readers might be a little surprised by that. Can you give me an unexpected example of a business that has actually been successful at tying online influence to offline results?
Well, there's really, okay, now you're asking two questions there.
Yes.
You're talking about the weak links and strong links and influence and business results. So let's start there. The part of the book that I think is the most fun and also it's maybe the part that I'm most proud of is there's a chapter in the book that has case studies about exactly what you're talking about. And I've got, big companies, small companies, nonprofits, B2B, B2C. And the thing that was interesting and challenging about this is that I talked to a lot of different companies, but they don't want to talk about the results because it's working. Yeah. So, if someone came to you, if you had some success with one of your clients and they said, well, we're going to put out this book, tell us the secrets to your success with this client, you're going to say, no, I can't do that. It wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be appropriate. Maybe you have an NDA. Maybe it's a competitive advantage. So some of these big brands, like Disney, American Express, Nike, really wouldn't talk. There are success stories there, and 80% of the people, now we're talking clout specifically, 80% of the companies using clout for these clout perk programs have continued to do more. So I think there's a message there. Now, one of the interesting big brands that was willing to talk was Audi. And I thought this was particularly creative because what Audi tried to do is they said, here's an opportunity to identify groups of people who we may not have normally connected with. We know there are people out there reading the car magazines and doing comparison shopping. We've got these car fanatics. We've got that down. We know how to communicate to them. We know how to go to the car shows and have a nice display at the car shows. The way they used it, they went to clout and they said, we want to find a group of people that are influential in technology and design. All right? And they said, our car is so technologically advanced and so beautiful. If these people love technology and design, they're going to love our car, and we want to get into a whole new audience of fans. So they created special events and invited not car people, not car fanatics, but they were able to find this group of people that they never had connected with before, invited them to these shows and had these special events, and all of a sudden they started showing up in these tech magazines, in these tech blogs, in design magazines. And they were reaching a whole new group of people, creating awareness for almost no money. I mean, they just, the price of these special events that they had in different cities. So it wasn't like big, trade shows or advertising or anything like this. It was trying to find these word of mouth influencers that say, you know what? We know you're passionate about technology and design. Take a look at this. We're creating something just for you. We think you're going to like it, and make their brand and their product conversational and hope that it ignites. So there's lots of different examples like that in the book, big brands, small brands.
That's powerful, and it does speak to the idea of, I think a social media link might be weak, but the job of a good marketer, I believe, is to reinforce that weak link with the right content, the right contact, and then all of a sudden it becomes very, very powerful. But in and of itself, I think at heart it is weak. It's our job, I believe, to bolster it, strategically and appropriately.
Well, the way I see social media fitting into the marketing mix is that social media can provide this constant stream of touch points and what I call in my writing these provocations, content provocations that will, create awareness or give somebody a reason to come and connect with you. Now, one of the best known examples of this right from the recent news is the thing that Coca-Cola has created. Right. They've turned their website into a news magazine.
Yep.
And so and if you haven't, for the people watching this, if you haven't looked at this, explore it a little bit and see what they're doing. They have this site called Coca-Cola Journey, and they've got a section on lifestyle and sports and entertainment. And I'm finding myself looking at the content on this site, and they're creating these provocations where now I'm engaged in the Coca-Cola website. I've never been engaged in the Coca-Cola website unless I was trying to, get a screenshot for an example for a class I'm teaching or something like that. But now they're creating conversations. They're creating these provocations and engagement with the brand. And I think that's where social media fits in, is to create the opportunity to create this constant stream of content that leads to bigger interactions, that leads to engagement, loyalty, and then finally, friendship and buying customers. So, I was on the Coca-Cola site, and I was reading some content, and I happened to see about some new technology they were introducing in their vending machines. I thought, well, that's really interesting. So, I am learning about the company. I'm learning about the brand while I'm on there looking at entertainment news or something like that.
Yeah, the Holy Grail these days, arguably, if we entertain you, you might also be willing to read something about a vending machine innovation, which, in and of itself probably wouldn't have been something you would have chosen to do that morning.
Yeah, but this idea, and this is something that I see all the time, is that marketers, entrepreneurs, PR people consistently overestimate the power and the potential of these social media likes or fans or followers.
Right.
And if you talk to anybody who's been out here really, working this for a couple of years, it's almost impossible to get these weak connections.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it in the long term. You can't say, I'm going to build a crowd of 50,000 people on Twitter and then all of a sudden ask them to buy my product. It doesn't work that way. It can't work that way unless you get incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
But what you can do is day by day, month by month, create these relationships, create these connections, help, give, and then at some point ask.
Yeah.
and see what happens. And you'll get the results, you'll get the conversions from the people that you've spent the time with, from the people that you've entertained with your content or helped with your content, or connected with your content. And that's That's where the power is, but it's not going to happen overnight. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of patience, as you know.
Yes, time being of the essence always with this. Well, so let's talk a little bit about what has arguably been a lightning rod topic in influence, which is clout. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can start a little bit, Mark, by defining clout, but let me ask you to go on after we talk about it for a second. In your book, you mentioned that clout creator Joe Fernandez says that it's not about the A-list anymore, it's about every person, and that he believes that clout embodies that vision. Do you agree with that? Is that true of clout today? Should everyone become invested in their clout score?
Well, I think that's two different things. I mean, I think and whenever we talk about clout has become kind of a name like Kleenex.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of different companies out there. In the back of the book, I think I list over 20 different companies, and there's even more since the book came out. So, I mean, there are lots of different companies looking at this, but they're all basically doing the same thing. And this is where the emotion happens. Clout has done themselves a disservice in some ways because they've made a number of PR blunders. And the real lightning rod is their tagline is the standard for influence. And that bothers people. It bothers me because they're not going to be the standard of influence in my home, on my job. But what they can do, and the only thing they can do, is try to measure, are you someone who can create content that moves through a network, all right? And if you look at a lot of people's jobs these days, sales, marketing, PR, service, even HR, that's increasingly an important thing of what people do. And if you look at me as an example, why am I here talking to you today? It's because you connected with me, maybe first on Twitter and then through my blog and then maybe through my book. But it is my ability to create content that got your attention that got me here today. That's all. We had never talked on the phone before. We had never met before. Then eventually we got interested enough in each other that we did talk on the phone and we did Skype and then we did have lunch in New York. So, and that's how it works, all right? So the ability to create content that moves, create content that gets shared and is ignited, that is a legitimate source of power and influence on the web today. And if you look at, clout, look, it's not perfect. These companies are still in the silent movie stages, and they have a long way to go. But if you look at, okay, Brian Solis, can he move content better than me? Yes. Can I move content better than some of my students at Rutgers? Yes. So, all it is a relative ability to create content that moves.
That's a really helpful definition. I'm not sure I've ever heard that before with clout, but that does sum up what it is, and I think
that's all it does.
What it's not. Yeah.
But it is useful. It's an indicator.
Sure.
It's like, a credit score. Credit scores aren't perfect. They can't predict behavior. They can't predict whether you're actually going to pay back a loan or not. And yet, millions of companies use credit scores very profitably, all right? It's an indicator of something. So I don't think clout, they're never going to look at all influence, but they do look at something. And I think for many companies, that's important, the thing that it's indicating.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Well, so let's leave clout behind and let's talk a little bit about influence overall. Again, I think it's a concept that marketers are still trying to grapple with, understand how they can effectively use it as part of their programs in 2013. Can you describe a couple of influence marketing best practices? Are there steps that make the most sense for professionals who either want to extend their own reach or the reach of a brand or a client?
Well, here's kind of the irony of the whole thing, because I get requests all the time. People want to know, how can I increase my clout score? How can I increase my influence? And there's a lot of research in this field right now. It is a hot topic. So there's a lot of academic research taking place at universities. And so there's a lot, we don't know, what clout and cred and all these companies, what they're using in their formulas, but we can look at this research and make a pretty good guess. So you need to, the three things you basically need to do that I talk about in the book is, number one, obviously what we've been talking about all along here, is you've got to create content. You've got to have content that is shareable. Number two, you've got to ignite that content. The content has to move. And this is what most businesses and individuals miss, because every social media success story has a content strategy and a network strategy. And people get the content part. They think, well, we need to blog, we need to post on Facebook, we need to tweet, but they don't get the network part. So the content isn't powerful. It's not helping you if it doesn't move. So if you're not reading my blog content, if you get it in your inbox every day and you don't share it or you don't react to it, then our relationship is going to wither. So you've got to have a network strategy. And then third, you've got to consistently engage, all right? So if you send me tweets and you ask me questions or you make nice comments about a blog post that I write and I never respond to you back, you're going to become resentful. You're going to wonder what's going on. And the social web, there is an expectation that you're going to be social. So those three things, content, working on a network that's going to has some disposition to be interested in you. And that is something I think we need to do mindfully and systematically. And then finally, engaging consistently. And if you do those three things, the influence is going to take care of itself. And the irony is, as a marketing professional, Elizabeth, this is the same advice you would give any client or any company. You'd tell them the same three things.
Yeah.
We've got to do good work. We've got to create content that's relevant, interesting, timely, and entertaining.
Right.
We've got to find people who are interested in us. Or it's just going to sit there. And we've got to be helpful. We've got to engage in that way. And that's what we would tell anybody. And really, that's long term. I mean, there are short-term ways that you can kind of game the system to get a little lift in your clout score. But long-term, that's the only way to do it. You've got to do those three things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do think something you consistently talked about in the blog and other places is the point you just made about being helpful. It's engaging, but helpful is a really important component that I think most people don't, and most businesses don't pay enough attention to. There's engagement, and helpful I see in some ways is a level beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, because they're tired of being advertised to.
Right.
They're tired of being sold to. They go on Facebook to play Farmville. They go to Facebook to get away from us.
Right. Right.
But so they're not going. They don't care about your new line of ball bearings. They don't care about your new line of yogurt or whatever. But if you can present this in a way that you're helping people make money, save time, have a happy, healthier, more interesting, more fun life, then they will spend time with your content. They won't spend 3 seconds with an ad, but they're going to spend 30 minutes with a really great story.
Right. Arguably really the secret recipe to social media success in many ways. Well, so I know you've faced this question. I know I have definitely faced this question. It feels like almost every day these days. But if a client asked you right now to develop a way to calculate their own return on influence, how would you advise them to start? What would be the building blocks that would need to be in place? Recognizing that, of course, at the end of the day, it has to be custom for any company that starts it. But are there some general observations you would share with us?
Well, first I want to clarify, because there is some confusion around this point. Because people who haven't read my book see ROI, return on influence, and they may think, oh, here's this guy trying to come up with some new fluffy metric. That is not the point at all. That is not the case at all. It's a clever title, but I recognize there's only one ROI. It's a financial term. It's only a financial term, return on investment, and there's a very specific calculation. So, we don't need to change that. We don't need to challenge that. So, I mean, there really isn't, anything in my book that would try to suggest that this is a new, a new metric. Instead, I think it's a tool and a mindset and an approach that can help support the appropriate metrics for your business. So if you're trying to build awareness, how do we use some of these new tools to find the word of mouth advocates out there, the people who already love our product and our company? How do we find those people? How do we nurture them? How do we reward them? How do we, do whatever we can to help them and help them ignite our content? If one of our goals is to get people to, upload or download or participate or, eventually to buy something, then, ROI isn't necessarily the metric to do that. We have those metrics, but how this is like, it's a tool like the phone or the newspaper. It's not a metric, but I think businesses today, marketers today, they need to understand what's really behind this. I mean, a lot of people, what's happening, Elizabeth, that's so concerning to me and frustrating, really, is there's this echo chamber around clout, that people just keep repeating the same, frankly, stupid arguments over and over again, like, well, Justin Bieber has a higher clout score than Warren Buffett. Right. This can't be true. Right. Well, that's just a stupid argument. Warren Buffett is not igniting content on the web. That's all it measures. But that still doesn't mean it can't be a tool that we can use in a very defined, in a very narrow way. So I really have a passion and a sense of urgency to try to help people to understand, what does this really do? What can we glean from this? And most important, where is it going? Because we are just seeing the beginning of this stuff. And I believe that there is a first mover advantage for the companies, the individuals, the brands that get in on the bottom floor with this, really understand these connectors, the super connectors, these influencers. Because here's what's going to happen. If you start building relationships with these influencers and they become passionate advocates for your brand, when the next person comes along, they're going to go, no, we're already committed to this. Right. Because, I mean, we form relationships with brands and products just as we do with individuals. Over time, they're not brands, they're our buddies. We already have our buddies. So there is a first mover advantage, and that's why I want people to really understand, don't be caught up in the hype and the fear and the churning going on there around clout. Understand what is really the trend, what's the math, what's the science, what are the practical applications for our businesses, and I think that can help a business get competitive advantage.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important too with that analogy about Justin Bieber and Warren Buffett. I personally have seen that at least 50, 60 times in variations myself. I just
want to scream.
And it's distracting.
They're just repeating it back and forth to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And these are people that don't understand what's going on, and they're raising all this emotion. They're raising all this turmoil. But it's an uninformed view. Yeah. It just simply is.
Yeah. I have a pet peeve for people who are in the echo chamber, because almost always they fail to be thinking about, it seems like, context. And context is everything, right? Understanding clout and assigning whatever level of drama to it, you should be doing that by sequencing it and understanding the context first. And if you do that, it's actually quite clear to see what role clout plays. But I feel like sometimes folks just want to cheat and skip over the context part of learning.
And this is a great point. And I think if you really want to look where this is heading. There's a company right there in Manhattan, not far from your office, as a matter of fact. It's a startup called Opinions. It's like Opinions, but it's APP at the beginning.
Okay.
Now, what's significant here? This is a company. They've got patented technology, and they're looking beyond social media, mentions. They're looking across 5 million news sources. Incredibly powerful algorithms to really redefine, online influence and taking it. I mean, it's just big data analysis. It's mind-boggling what they can do. When I first saw a demo, my jaw dropped on the table. I just could not believe. And this is really a glimpse of where it's heading. So, like I said, clout has kind of become just a generic term.
Yeah.
But you can't, you just simply can't say, oh, clout scores are meaningless, because you're missing the whole view of what's really happening there. The breathtaking pace of development and the science that's going behind this. And I think Opinions is an example of that.
It sounds like a company to watch.
Yeah.
Well, let me reference something that caught my eye at the conclusion of your book. You observed that, quote, by assigning numbers to people and stacking them up in order, the system institutionalizes a culture of have and have-nots, end quote. So I think that's very true. So how can smart marketers reach the have-nots in the future? Do you think, does it even make sense to try in an era of diminishing budgets, reduced, priority sets? I mean, can we reach the have-nots?
That's a really interesting idea. And, what I meant by that is for the first 95% of the book, I took I tried to, it's entertaining, and I tell a lot of stories. But I tried my best to tell a story that was factual. I didn't really try to insert my opinions in it too much. But then at the end, in the last chapter, I said, well, I've been studying this thing for almost a year now. I have some concerns. And one of the concerns I mentioned is what you mentioned, is that a lot of this stuff, there's a frenzy going on in some places around these clout scores, because some of the perks going out there are pretty darn good. You could get plane flights, you can get, gaming systems and merchandise. And so the people that are being left behind, how are they going to feel about this stuff? Are they going to be resentful? Are they going to try to game the system? I mean, what's really going to happen sociologically? I think that's interesting. And, you bring up a point I've never really even thought of before, but, how do you reach the people that kind of turn the other way?
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting idea. I haven't really thought about that, but I will.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'd love it if you would conclude with sharing a story we talked a little bit about offline before we started the interview. I will tee it up by mentioning that you wrote a blog post that certainly influenced me, sharing a story of a friend of yours named Elijah. And I think it might be a nice way to summarize your thoughts on what influence can do and maybe what it can't do. Would you share that with the PRBC folks?
Yes, I'd love to. I wrote a blog post recently about a charity that I'm involved with and a little boy that I take care of. And he, long story short, he doesn't really have any parents. He's being raised by his grandmother with a lot of brothers and sisters in a very crowded house. And when I asked him what he wanted for Christmas, he said, he went like this. And I couldn't figure out what he was saying. It was something square. And I said, is it a game, gaming system? Is it an Xbox or something? And he said, no. And I said, well, I give up. What is it? He said, I want a door. Just a door. I want a door. And I said, What do you mean you want a door? Well, his situation is his house is so crowded, he's sleeping in this dining area. And right next to the dining area, there's the TV's going all night long. He can't go to sleep. So he wants a door. So, I'm going to get him a door. And then I thought, you know what? I really believe in this charity, this charity that I'm involved in, where you put these adult mentors with these children who are at risk, these inner city kids generally who are at risk. I said, I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to see, what happened was their federal funding got cut off. So I said, I'm going to ask my block community for help and see what happens. Now, let's use this as a case study for influence. This is very, very difficult to do because I realize, although I've got 50,000 Twitter followers, these are weak connections, all right? And a lot of businesses and brands have an expectation. Oh my gosh, you've got 50,000 Twitter followers, the world is at your feet. And that is just not true. Yeah. One of the things I talk about extensively in the book is that I've got a couple case studies in there where people like Alyssa Milano with huge followings can't move the needle. Yeah. When it's, if she says, well, go like this page or go follow this person on Twitter, that's easy. You can click a button. But when it comes time to open up your wallet, they don't do it. So I knew this was really perilous, really, for me to say, I want to ask for your money. Now, what happened was I ended up getting, I haven't done the final numbers yet, but I got, I think it ended up around between 80 and 90 donors, maybe even a little higher. And I actually raised $5,000. So this exceeded my expectations, but here's the lesson. And I'm going to write about this in my blog as well as a case study, that if you look at the number of donations and the value of the donations, almost all of it came from strong connections that were built over time through the social web, like you. Now, you were kind enough to give a donation, and that was very generous of you. So you and I have a connection. You and I have a relationship. I've done things to help you. You've done things to help me. So when you read that blog post, it touched you and you said, this is a chance to give back. This is a chance to have some reciprocity and help Mark out. So this is a lesson in that the power, the real influence, doesn't necessarily come from those the high volume, weak connections. That's the way all these social media connections start. But the power comes from taking the time, to being consistent, to focusing on great content, surround yourself with people who care about you, and be helpful. Those create strong links that eventually convert into action. Now, the other thing that was remarkable about this that surprised me is that there were a number of people who I don't know that did contribute. And the one example that you gave was that you passed my blog post along to your sister, and your sister contributed. So let's go back to the beginning of our discussion. What's clout? What's in online influence? Online influence is the ability to create content that moves through your system and beyond. So in this example, I created content that brought you into my system. We became a strong connection, and then I created content that moved you. You sent that to people outside of my system, and now they're contributing to my charity. And that's what online influence is about. That's how it works. It's a perfect case study, really, to emphasize what really happened in this case study. And is clout a predictor of that? No. But the clout score is an indicator of my ability for something like that to happen eventually. It's like a leading indicator of people taking action. So it's a great case study, and thanks for asking me about that.
Well, I love the story, and I love the fact that Elijah's getting a new door too. I'll be thinking about him at Christmas time.
Yeah, I'm covering the door.
Excellent.
And all the money that's coming in from my blog community is going right to the charity, 100, every penny of it.
That's terrific. Well, I have selfishly completely enjoyed our conversation today. I've never had a conversation with you where I haven't learned something or had an inspiration that I can take into my own life, and I know that PRBC folks will have had that same experience. If you want to see part 1 of this conversation between Mark and myself, you can go to my blog, B2B Bliss, and search for Mark, and I'm sure it will come up. And I will just conclude by saying a very happy holiday to you, my friend. You are always a delight, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been a pleasure.